All right, everyone. Donald Trump has warned the Venezuelan military that if they continue to stand by Maduro, they might lose everything. And some people are taking this to mean a threat, like, oh my God, he's going to invade. Look, he loves war. He's an interventionist. He's world police. I don't think that at all. And by the way, if Trump were to say, well, okay, we're sending troops to Venezuela to get rid of Maduro, I would absolutely oppose it. Now, I've warned against that for like 4 years now that it's a bad idea. I think we should continue to just use diplomatic pressure. And if the Latin American states want to get involved, that's their own borders. You've got an absolute hemorrhage of people out of Venezuela right now because the shortages and protests and everything are getting worse. You remember, for a while there, the protests had kind of dried up because most of the people who are, more young and ballsy, the sort of people who tend to protest at higher levels, they had left. A lot of them had fled. A lot of the sort of student revolutionaries, you could call them, had left the country because they're like, well, we're going to die here. Maduro will have us killed or we're starved to death. We need to go to Colombia, Brazil, or whatever. They left the country. So there wasn't anyone in some of the urban areas to keep being provocateurs to cause protests. Now, though, it's like everyone else in the population in Caracas appears to have been on the streets last week, and has been, continuously almost throughout the country. You have a currency that's massively hyperinflated to the point of no return. It's a dead currency. Nobody uses bolivars. I don't even know, can they even use them in their own country? Like, if you've got a stack of them, like the paper used as fuel or even toilet paper has got to be worth more than the actual noted value on the bolivars. They had to phase out the old ones, add more zeros. Then they did the new sovereign bolivar or whatever, and they took the zeros back off. And it's like, well, it doesn't mean anything. It means absolutely nothing. There's no economy there. There's nothing to back the currency. Debt-addled, and there are a bunch of dead people every day getting killed by Maduro's snipers and so forth. So some people are taking it as a threat. They're saying, well, Trump is threatening invasion. I don't think so. I think the U.S. strategy appears to be to bring pressure to bear and have the threat of invasion loom over Venezuela to pressure Maduro to leave or to pressure the military there to get skittish and kill him off, essentially, to try to get them to intervene in their own situation by making it look like we're going to get involved. Trust me, this worked in Korea. Why do you think Bolton was appointed? Why do you think Pompeo was appointed? Why do you think Trump stacked his staff there with a bunch of notorious warmongers to make it look like the U.S. was preparing for a war? And then he started talking about Korea. And Kim Jong-un took a look at all of the Iraq-era warmongering neocons on Trump's staff and said, well, I guess he might be crazy and serious. It's just the Kissinger madman strategy. Trump hangs around with him too. It worked. It worked in Korea. Finally, peace has broken out specifically because of the threat of war. In a lopsided struggle like that, you think that the other person is nuts. You're probably a little bit more willing to at least entertain the possibility of peace accords or talks or something, some bilateral talk. Or in that case, quadrilateral talks, because China and South Korea are both involved. It's really funny. Peace is being progressed towards there. I don't think that Trump is a warmonger. He has consistently advocated a more or less non-interventionist stance. Like in Iraq, they tried to say that he was a proponent of the Iraq War before it happened, and he had to clarify, no, I was talking about them sending a few dudes in to kill Saddam off. I didn't say invade the country, which checks out. That's actually true. The fact checkers had a field day calling it half true, but it's like, no, he immediately warned in the wake of the invasion it was a bad idea. And he was one of the few people in the whole fucking country to get it. So credit to him for that. Oddly enough, Bernie Sanders, one of the only other people to get it at the time. And it's like the funniest thing ever. It's sort of like with the anti-BDS thing. It's like a bunch of progressives are the ones standing against it. It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense at all. DC's lost its mind, ages ago. Fucking blew a membrane out. Venezuela, though, I think will lose everything, regardless of what happens. If the U.S. were to invade, it would ironically be long-term better off for their economy because we could restructure it. I would never support that, though. I think it'd be a terrible idea and lead to a prolonged struggle. It would last a lot longer than even the warmongers would want, and it wouldn't be very lucrative. Look, oil right now isn't worth enough for them to, I think, bother intervening. I think the operative strategy is to cordon off Venezuela, essentially rob them of any real economic ties in the world until things are so desperate the people take Maduro out themselves. Which, by the way, is about the only thing to do. Look, if we were to reverse course and say, okay, sanctions, boycotts, all that stuff, we're not going to do that. We welcome you back to the world community at large. We have no problem with you. Manage your own shit. We're not going to be interventionists. We're going to trade with you, buy your oil and stuff. Even then, the fact that they have a worthless currency, lowered oil output, and the inability to pay their debt means that even under a good economic situation for Venezuela, if there was no U.S. sanctioning, if there were no sanctions by the rest of the Latin American states, if there was no UN condemnation of the Maduro regime, if all that was gone, their economy would still be in decline. They still would be hemorrhaging people, they still would be hemorrhaging jobs, the electricity would still be having brownouts, they'd have chronic shortages, and things would be almost as desperate as they already are. Because the problem of the Venezuelan economy is that Chavez fundamentally did not know what he was doing. It was Chavez's fault, not Maduro's. He never diversified. He takes over, he gets a roaring economy going because of oil, because oil's worth a lot. Not one little bit of investment of that oil revenue was put towards expanding infrastructure to start generating income from anything but oil. He said, well, we're just going to pump more and more of it. We've got huge oil reserves. We're going to pump it ourselves. We nationalize. No foreigners needed. Slightly nationalistic, by the way, for all the leftists out there. Chew on that one. It's really funny. We're going to pump the oil. We're going to sell it. We're going to borrow money against future oil that we're going to get. We're going to speculate. A bunch of speculation. Look, supposedly a bunch of capitalistic speculation drove the stock market collapse in the United States and begin the Great Depression. And yet these same leftists think there's nothing wrong with the scenario. They wrote glowing reviews of Venezuela. Oh, this is model socialism. This is real utopian socialism. Look at how happy their GDP is swiftly rising. Infant mortality way down. The longevity of the population increasing. They've got microwaves. They've got fridges. And for a while, that's true. They were rapidly advancing. What do we know about when the government starts frittering away things on stuff that doesn't actually develop the economy domestically, is just importing a bunch of microwaves and shit? Flatline, because the oil sales start to be worthless when the oil begins to be worthless. Instead of being, what was it at peak, 130, 140 a barrel or something, then it falls down to $50 or $60 a barrel. Whoops, but here's the problem. We had already borrowed that total value and then some, thinking it would always be at that higher cost. And so they got crushed by debt. All of a sudden, their debt to GDP ratio skyrockets, the currency begins to hyperinflate to try to deal with the debt, and they're fucked. That's Maduro's fault, but the structural problems were Chavez's fault. Venezuela has a climate capable of supporting an enormous agricultural industry. They have enough literacy in their population to contribute greatly to, they could have a huge amount of light industry especially. They could have a fully functioning modern first world economy. They could have built that by now, but they never tried. Chavez said, hey, I'm just going to give people free shit. I'll be in this position forever. And then, of course, he keels over. I think, didn't he die fairly young, too? I don't think he was that old a dude. Did he choke on one of his Cuban cigars or something like all socialists should do? Yeah, I think he did. Maybe someone assassinated. I think he had cancer, if I remember correctly. I can't remember. Who cares? Just another tin horner. Yeah, and he would have, by the way, shot at his own people, too. Don't get me wrong. He definitely would do the same thing Maduro's doing. He probably would have been more butcherous. Because he was already used to, like, you know, the fighting, guerrilla combat, socialist bullshit. Maduro, not so much. He was a fucking bus driver during the revolution. He's like, hey, I'll take your troops from place A to place B. I want to be a socialist, so redistribute some of that fucking money to me and give me some more food. Give me an MRE, really tasty. Of course, he's definitely not starving. You take a look at his, probable beer belly or whatever. He's eaten Putin's caviar and fish imported freshly caught from Cuba same day on ice. He doesn't have a problem with the reimportation, unlike their currency, which is so devalued at this point. They can't even ship it in. They were reimporting currency to try to buff their economy up. Can't do that anymore. It costs more to buy the fuel and maintain the plane that's bringing in the money than the money is worth. They might lose everything. Yeah, there could be a revolution at any time within Venezuela, or the military could flip out and kill him, or hang. They could hang him. They could put him on trial, oust him. It'll be chaos regardless. I don't support U.S. intervention, but I mean, like I've said before, it's not like Guaido and his people are free market capitalists. They're just basically socialists. They're just slightly less socialistic than Maduro, but that doesn't translate into the economy improving. The debt's still there. The hyperinflation is still there. The best possible scenario is Maduro gets a pigeonholed or something. He gets tossed into the drink and drowns. They fucking throw him in a shallow grave, okay? They get rid of Maduro, Guaido comes in, and then you have a reform movement that allows foreign intervention into their economy. Something that's open up to trade and travel and sort of, instead of shooting at people. The thing is, though, it's going to take a huge amount of money pumped in from foreign lands to stabilize the economy. A huge amount of foreign investment will have to be made to stabilize things there. Guaido is probably not going to be willing to see that happen because people there, partially being right in the process of saying this, will say, hey, we're getting robbed by these foreigners. They're coming in. Now they own the oil wells. Where's our socialist paradise that we've been born and raised in? That's going to be a little bit of a problem. That's the next looming problem in Venezuela. That's about all. Peace out.